Sometimes the most powerful moments happen when nobody's watching, when cameras aren't rolling, when social media isn't buzzing, when the spotlight has dimmed to nothing more than the soft glow of a restaurant's evening lights. That's when real character shows itself. That's when a single overheard conversation can remind us that behind every famous face is a human heart that still remembers what it feels like to struggle. What you're about to read isn't just another celebrity story. It's not about red carpets or million-dollar deals or screaming fans. It's about something much rarer and infinitely more valuable. The moment when someone with everything chooses to notice someone with nothing, and how that choice ripples outward in ways no one could have predicted. In a world where we've grown cynical about the rich and famous, where we assume success breeds indifference, this story will restore something you might not even realize you'd lost. Your faith in the power of genuine human kindness. Your belief that some people, no matter how high they rise, never forget where they came from. Get ready to witness what happens when a global superstar walks into an ordinary restaurant on an ordinary Tuesday night and walks out having changed not just one life, but potentially thousands. This is the story of how 30 seconds of overheard tears became a movement that nobody saw coming. The rain drummed against the windows of Rosie's diner like impatient fingers, each drop racing the others down the glass in a game that nobody was watching. Inside, the evening crowd was typical for a Tuesday in March. A handful of regulars nursing coffee that had long gone cold, a young couple sharing a piece of apple pie, and an elderly man reading yesterday's newspaper for the third time. Marcus Chun pulled his baseball cap lower over his eyes as he stepped through the door, the small bell above it announcing his arrival with a cheerful ding that seemed too bright for the gray evening. He'd specifically chosen this place because it was the kind of establishment where nobody expected to see someone like him. No velvet ropes, no photographers lurking in corners, no maitre d' who would recognize his face from magazine covers and movie posters. At 35, Marcus had spent the last 15 years building an empire that stretched from Hollywood to Broadway, from best-selling novels to chart-topping albums. His face graced billboards in Times Square, and his name appeared on Forbes' list with the kind of regularity that made his publicist smile and his accountant very happy. But tonight, he wasn't Marcus Chun the celebrity. He was just a tired man who wanted a quiet meal and maybe an hour where nobody wanted anything from him. The hostess, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical bun, glanced up from her podium. She looked at him with the same polite attention she'd give any customer, no flicker of recognition crossing her features. "Perfect. Table for one?" she asked, already reaching for a menu. "Please," Marcus replied, his voice hoarse from a day of interviews and meetings. "Somewhere quiet, if you have it." She led him to a corner booth, the vinyl seats cracked but comfortable, the table bearing the gentle scars of countless meals and conversations. The lighting was soft here, warm and yellow like honey, and Marcus felt his shoulders begin to relax for the first time in weeks. The diner carried the comforting sense of coffee, bacon grease, and something baking in the kitchen that reminded him of his grandmother's house. Real smells, honest smells, not the carefully curated fragrances of upscale restaurants where every detail was calculated for maximum impact. Here, the ambience came from 40 years of genuine use, not from an interior designer's vision board. Marcus opened the laminated menu, smiling at the simple offerings. Meatloaf and mashed potatoes, chicken and dumplings, grilled cheese with tomato soup. Food that came from the heart rather than from a team of culinary consultants. He couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten anywhere that served gravy as a food group, and considered it a point of pride. The other patrons continued their quiet conversations, the sound mixing with the soft jazz playing from speakers that had probably been installed during the Clinton administration. Nobody stared. Nobody whispered. Nobody pulled out their phone to sneak a photo. It was exactly what his soul needed after 3 months of promotional tours, red carpet events, and interviews where he had to explain his artistic vision for the 1,000th time. A server approached his table, and Marcus looked up to see a young man, probably early 20s, with sandy brown hair and the kind of genuine smile that hadn't yet been worn down by years of difficult customers. His name tag read Jamie, and there was something about his demeanor that immediately put Marcus at ease. "Good evening," Jamie said, setting down a glass of ice water without being asked. "Can I start you off with something to drink?" "Coffee would be great," Marcus replied. "Black. Coming right up. Have you had a chance to look at the menu? Or would you like a few more minutes?" Marcus appreciated that there was no rush, no subtle pressure to order quickly so the table could be turned over. This was a place where people were allowed to exist at their own pace, where time moved at the speed of comfort rather than profit margins. "I think I'll go with the meat loaf," he said, closing the menu. "And whatever vegetables are good today." "Excellent choice. Our cook, Mrs. Patterson, has been making that meatloaf the same way for 22 years. She uses a secret blend of 3 different types of meat and fresh herb from her own garden. The green beans are fresh too, picked this morning from the farm about 10 miles out of town." There was genuine pride in Jamie's voice as he talked about the food, the kind of enthusiasm that came from working somewhere that felt more like family than employment. Marcus found himself curious about the story behind this place, about the people who had created this pocket of warmth in an increasingly cold world. "Sounds perfect," Marcus said, handing back the menu. As Jamie walked away, Marcus pulled out his phone to check his messages, then thought better of it and slipped it back into his pocket. This hour belonged to him, not to his manager, his publicist, or the dozens of people who wanted pieces of his time. He leaned back in the booth and let himself simply exist in the moment, watching the rain continue its dance against the windows. The coffee arrived quickly, steam rising from the white ceramic mug in delicate spirals. Marcus wrapped his hands around it, savoring the warmth, and took a sip. It was good coffee, rich and strong without being bitter, the kind that came from beans that were chosen for flavor rather than profit margins. He could taste the care that had gone into making it, could sense the pride the establishment took in doing simple things well. Around him, the diner hummed with quiet life. The elderly man had moved on to the crossword puzzle, occasionally muttering clues under his breath. The young couple was deep in conversation about weekend plans, their hands intertwined across the table. Near the kitchen, a group of what looked like local workers shared stories and laughter over plates of hearty food. This was real life, Marcus realized. This was what he'd been missing during his years of success. The simple pleasure of being part of a community without being the center of attention. Here, he wasn't a commodity or a brand or a trending topic. He was just another customer enjoying a meal on a rainy Tuesday evening. The meat loaf arrived 15 minutes later, and it was everything Jamie had promised. Thick slices of perfectly seasoned meat accompanied by fluffy mashed potatoes, green beans that still had a satisfying crunch, and gravy that was clearly made from scratch rather than from a packet. Marcus ate slowly, savoring each bite, marveling at how food could taste so much better when it came from a place of genuine hospitality rather than calculated presentation. He was halfway through his meal when he heard it. A quiet sound from somewhere behind the partition that separated the dining area from the kitchen. At first, he thought it might be the dishwasher or some piece of equipment making noise, but as he listened more carefully, he realized what he was hearing. Someone was crying. The sound was muffled, as if whoever was making it was trying desperately not to be heard. It was the kind of crying that came from deep exhaustion, from the weight of problems that seemed too big to solve. Marcus had heard that sound before, years ago, when he was struggling to make ends meet while chasing his dreams in Los Angeles. He paused with his fork halfway to his mouth, listening despite himself. The crying continued, punctuated by the occasional sharp intake of breath that suggested whoever was back there was trying to pull themselves together. It was a private moment of despair, and Marcus felt like an intruder for overhearing it. But something about the sound struck him deeply. Maybe it was because he remembered so clearly what it felt like to cry alone in restaurant bathrooms between shifts, trying to figure out how he was going to make rent while still pursuing his passion. Maybe it was because success hadn't entirely erased his memory of feeling completely alone in a world that seemed indifferent to his struggles. The crying stopped abruptly replaced by the sound of running water and quiet movement. Someone was cleaning up, getting ready to return to work, probably hoping that their momentary breakdown hadn't been noticed by anyone. Marcus finished his meal in thoughtful silence. The taste somehow more complex now, flavored with an awareness of the real human drama playing out just a few feet away. When Jamie returned to clear his plate, Marcus studied the young man's face more carefully. Were his eyes a little red around the edges? Was his smile just slightly more forced than it had been earlier? How was everything? Jamie asked, his voice steady and professional. Excellent, Marcus replied honestly. Mrs. Patterson knows what she's doing. She'll be happy to hear that. Can I get you anything else? Dessert, maybe? We have fresh apple pie that's still warm. Marcus almost said no, ready to pay his check and disappear back into the rainy night. But something made him hesitate. Call it intuition, call it human curiosity, or call it the recognition of one struggling person by another who had once been exactly where they were. Actually, he said, could you sit down for a minute? You look like you could use a break. Jamie's professional smile faltered for just a moment, surprise flickering across his features. Oh, that's very kind of you. But I'm working. I shouldn't. When do you get off? Marcus asked gently. Not for another 4 hours, Jamie admitted. And there was something in his voice that confirmed Marcus's growing suspicion that this young man was carrying more weight than anyone his age should have to bear. Marcus glanced around the diner. The evening crowd was thin, and the other servers seemed to have everything under control. He made a decision that would change everything that came after, though he had no way of knowing it at the time. Look, he said, lowering his voice, I'm not trying to be weird or intrusive, but I've been where you are. If you need to talk to someone who understands what it's like to work multiple jobs while trying to keep your head above water, I'm here. No judgment, no strings attached. Sometimes it helps to tell a stranger what you can't tell the people who know you. For a long moment, Jamie just stood there, uncertainty playing across his face. Marcus could see the internal debate, the professional training warring with a very human need for connection and understanding. Finally, Jamie glanced toward the kitchen, then back at Marcus. I'll be right back, he said quietly. As Jamie disappeared toward the back of the restaurant, Marcus realized that he had just crossed an invisible line. He wasn't just a customer anymore, wasn't just a celebrity hiding from the public eye. He had become something much more complex and potentially meaningful, a witness to someone else's struggle, and possibly, if he played this right, a lifeline. Jamie returned 5 minutes later, moving with the careful composure of someone who had splashed cold water on their face and given themselves a stern talking to in the bathroom mirror. He slid into the booth across from Marcus, his hands clasped tightly on the table, knuckles white with tension. I'm sorry, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't make a habit of breaking down at work. It's just been a really long day, and sometimes... Hey, Marcus interrupted gently. You don't owe me an apology. We all have those days. I once cried in the bathroom of a Taco Bell in Hollywood for 20 minutes because I couldn't afford to buy anything on the menu, and I hadn't eaten in 2 days. The confession hung between them for a moment, and Marcus watched as surprise replaced some of the tension in Jamie's posture. Here was this well-dressed stranger, clearly successful based on his clothes and manner, admitting to the kind of vulnerability that Jamie thought was his alone to carry. Really? Jamie asked, and for the first time since he'd sat down, his voice carried something other than embarrassment. Really, Marcus confirmed. 2009. I was trying to make it as a writer, working 3 part-time jobs, sleeping on a friend's couch that was older than both of us combined. I had $17 to my name, and a credit card that had been declined so many times the plastic was wearing thin from embarrassment. A ghost of a smile flickered across Jamie's face. What changed? Persistence, mostly. A little bit of luck. And the kindness of strangers who saw something in me when I couldn't see it in myself. Marcus leaned forward slightly. What's going on with you? And please don't feel like you have to tell me anything you're not comfortable sharing. Jamie was quiet for a long moment, staring down at his hands. When he finally spoke, the words came slowly, as if he was testing each one before letting it out into the world. "My mom's sick," he said. "Has been for about 8 months now. Multiple sclerosis. She was diagnosed right after I graduated high school, right when I was supposed to start college on a partial scholarship." Marcus felt his chest tighten. He'd heard variations of this story before, but it never got easier. Young people forced to choose between their dreams and their family obligations, trapped by circumstances beyond their control. "She was a nurse for 15 years, Jamie continued. "Single mom, raised me and my little sister by herself after our dad left when I was 12. She's the strongest person I know, worked double shifts to make sure we had everything we needed, never complained, never made us feel like we were a burden." The admiration in Jamie's voice was evident, but so was the pain. Marcus recognized the tone of someone watching their hero become human, vulnerable, dependent. "The MS started slowly," Jamie said. "Little things at first. She'd drop coffee cups sometimes, or her hand would shake when she was trying to write. We thought it was just stress from work. But then she started having trouble walking, and the fatigue got so bad that she couldn't make it through a full shift." Marcus nodded, encouraging Jamie to continue without interrupting the flow of words that seemed to be pouring out of him like water through a broken dam. "She had to stop working 6 months ago. The disability payments barely cover her medications, let alone rent and groceries and everything else. My sister Emma is a sophomore in high school, straight A student, wants to be a doctor someday. She shouldn't have to worry about whether we can afford to keep the lights on, but here we are." The picture was becoming clearer, and Marcus felt a familiar ache in his chest. He remembered what it was like to be young and feel responsible for more than you could possibly handle, to lie awake at night doing math that never quite added up no matter how many times you ran the numbers. "So you're working here, and—" Marcus prompted gently. "Here, and at a grocery store on weekends, and I do freelance graphic design when I can find clients. I made it through 2 semesters at community college before I had to drop out to work more hours. I keep telling myself it's temporary, that I'll go back once we get caught up, but—" Jamie's voice trailed off, and Marcus could see the doubt creeping in. "But it feels like you're treading water in the middle of the ocean," Marcus finished. "Exactly." Jamie looked up, surprised again by the understanding in Marcus's voice. "How did you know?" "Because I've been there. Different circumstances, same feeling. Like you're working as hard as you possibly can, but somehow always falling further behind." Jamie nodded, some of the isolation he'd been carrying seeming to lift just from having it acknowledged. "The worst part is I love my mom and sister so much, and I do anything for them. But sometimes I lie awake at night wondering what my life would have looked like if things had been different. And then I feel guilty for even thinking about it." "That doesn't make you selfish," Marcus said firmly. "That makes you human. Loving someone doesn't mean you can't grieve for the life you had to put on hold." For the first time since he'd sat down, Jamie's shoulders seemed to relax completely. Someone understood. Someone saw the impossible position he was in and didn't judge him for feeling overwhelmed by it. "What happened today that made it especially hard?" Marcus asked. Jamie let out a shaky breath. "Emma's guidance counselor called this afternoon. She has the grades and test scores to get into really good schools, maybe even with scholarships. But she needs to start thinking about applications, about SAT prep courses, about all the things that cost money we don't have." The counselor was trying to be helpful, talking about all these opportunities, but all I could think about was how we're already 3 months behind on rent, and the electric company sent a final notice yesterday. Marcus felt anger rise in his chest, not at Jamie or his family, but at a system that forced an 18-year-old to choose between his sister's future and keeping the lights on. He thought about his own teenage years, when his biggest worry had been whether he'd make varsity basketball. The privileges he'd taken for granted seemed almost obscene in comparison. "I came into work today, trying to act like everything was normal," Jamie continued, "but Mrs. Patterson took one look at me and sent me to the back to get myself together. That's when you heard me. Mrs. Patterson sounds like a good boss. The best. She knows about Mom, gives me as many hours as she can without getting in trouble with the labor laws. Sometimes she accidentally makes too much food, and sends me home with enough dinner for 3 people. She pretends it's because she doesn't want to waste it, but Jamie smiled for the first time since sitting down. She's good people. Marcus filed that information away, adding Mrs. Patterson to his growing mental list of people in this story who deserved recognition for their kindness. "What's your mom's prognosis?" he asked carefully. "The doctors say it's hard to predict with MS. Some people have it for decades with minimal symptoms. Others progress more quickly. Mom's trying to stay positive, but I can see her getting weaker. Some days are better than others, but the trajectory isn't great." The weight of watching a parent decline while trying to hold a family together was something Marcus couldn't personally relate to, but he could imagine the crushing responsibility. At 18, Jamie was essentially the head of household for a family in crisis, with no safety net and no clear path forward. What about other family? Aunts, uncles, grandparents? Mom's parents died when I was little. Her brother lives in Seattle, but he's got his own problems. Dad's side of the family. Jamie shrugged. They made it pretty clear when he left that we weren't their concern anymore. So they were truly on their own, this small family of 3, trying to navigate a crisis that would challenge people twice their age with twice their resources. Marcus felt a deep respect for Jamie, for the way he'd stepped up despite having every excuse to fall apart. "You know what strikes me most about your story?" Marcus said. "What?" "You're not complaining about the unfairness of it all. You're not angry at your mom for getting sick, or your dad for leaving, or the world for dealing you a difficult hand. You're just trying to figure out how to solve the problem." Jamie looked down at his hands again. What good would complaining do? Mom didn't choose to get MS. Emma didn't choose to have a sick parent. Life just happens sometimes, and you deal with it. The maturity in those words, coming from someone who should have been worrying about college classes and weekend plans rather than medical bills and rent payments, was both inspiring and heartbreaking. Marcus found himself thinking about his own 18-year-old self, how self-absorbed and focused on his own dreams he'd been. This kid was operating on a completely different level. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said. "Sure. What would you study if money wasn't an issue? What did you want to do before everything changed?" Jamie's face lit up for the first time since the conversation began. "Graphic design, actually. Maybe web development, too. I love creating things, solving visual problems, figuring out how to make complex information accessible and beautiful. I taught myself Photoshop and Illustrator from YouTube videos, and I've been doing logos and website mock-ups for small businesses around town." "That's what you do freelance?" "Yeah, it doesn't pay much, and it's not steady work, but I love it. There's something about starting with a blank screen and ending up with something that helps someone else communicate their vision. It feels like magic sometimes." Marcus could hear the passion in Jamie's voice, could see the spark that adversity hadn't quite managed to extinguish. This wasn't someone who had given up on his dreams. He was someone who had temporarily set them aside while dealing with more pressing needs. The distinction mattered. "Show me some of your work," Marcus said, and Jamie's eyes widened. "What?" "Your portfolio. You must have examples on your phone or somewhere. I'd like to see what you've created." "You really want to look at amateur design work from small town, kid?" "I want to look at work created by someone with talent and passion who taught himself professional skills from free resources. That tells me more about a person's potential than any expensive degree ever could." Jamie hesitated for a moment, then pulled out his phone. As he scrolled through his photo gallery looking for examples, Marcus caught glimpses of family photos, a woman who shared Jamie's eyes and smile, a teenage girl with braces, and an infectious grin. This wasn't just a story about one person struggling. It was about a family trying to stay together and maintain hope in the face of circumstances that could have easily torn them apart. When Jamie finally found his portfolio and started showing Marcus his work, the quality was immediately apparent. Clean logos, intuitive website layouts, marketing materials that managed to be both professional and creative. For someone self-taught and working with limited resources, the work was remarkably sophisticated. "This is impressive," Marcus said, and he meant it. "Really impressive. You have a natural eye for design and a clear understanding of how visual communication works." "Thank you," Jamie replied, but there was skepticism in his voice, as if he was waiting for the "but that would follow." Instead, Marcus surprised him. "How would you feel about doing some freelance work for me?" Jamie stared at Marcus as if he'd, suddenly, started speaking in a foreign language. "Freelance work? For you?" Marcus nodded, his mind already racing with possibilities. "I'm always working on various projects that need design elements. Social media graphics, website updates, promotional materials. The company I usually work with charges premium rates, and honestly, your aesthetic is more in line with what I'm looking for anyway." "What kind of business are you in?" Jamie asked, clearly trying to process this unexpected turn in the conversation. Marcus hesitated. This was the moment where his carefully maintained anonymity would either continue or completely evaporate. He studied Jamie's face, noting the genuine curiosity and complete lack of recognition. In a world where his image was plastered across entertainment websites and magazine covers, he had found someone who saw him simply as a kind stranger willing to listen. "Entertainment industry," he said finally, which was technically true while still being deliberately vague. "I'm involved in various creative projects that need visual branding and promotional support." "Like what kind of projects?" "Films, music, publishing. I wear a lot of different hats." Marcus pulled out his business card, one of the generic ones that listed only his production company name and contact information, nothing that would immediately identify him as the person behind multiple best-selling novels and award-winning films. Jamie took the card, reading it carefully. "Chun Creative Productions." He looked up. "This is really your company?" "It really is. And you're offering me actual paid work? Not just being nice because you feel sorry for me." The directness of the question caught Marcus off guard, but it also reinforced his growing respect for this young man. Jamie wasn't looking for charity. He was looking for opportunity. There was a crucial difference. "I'm offering you work because you're talented, and I have projects that need someone with your skills," Marcus said honestly. "The fact that I like you as a person is a bonus, but I don't make business decisions based on sentiment. I can't afford to." Jamie was quiet for a moment, studying the business card as if it might hold additional secrets. "What kind of timeline are we talking about? And what would the pay be like?" Marcus appreciated the practical questions. This wasn't someone who got carried away by excitement. He was thinking like a professional, even while trying to wrap his head around this unexpected opportunity. "I usually have ongoing needs, so it could be fairly steady work if the first few projects go well. As for pay, what do you typically charge for logo design?" "It depends on the complexity, but usually between $50 and $200, depending on what the client wants and what they can afford." Marcus tried not to wince. Those rates wouldn't even cover the consultation fee for his usual design team. But he also understood that Jamie was pricing his services based on his local market and his own assessment of his worth. Part of helping someone grow was showing them what their work was actually worth in a broader market. "What if I told you that I typically budget $500 to $1,500 for logo work, depending on the scope?" Jamie's eyes widened. "Are you serious?" "Completely. Good design isn't a luxury. It's an investment. The visual representation of a project can make or break its success. Someone with your talent shouldn't be undervaluing their work." For a moment, Jamie looked like he might cry again, but this time for entirely different reasons. Marcus could practically see him doing mental math, calculating how much difference that kind of income could make for his family. "When would you need to start?" Jamie asked. "What's your schedule like this week?" "I work here Tuesday through Friday nights, weekends at the grocery store, and I try to squeeze in freelance work whenever I can find time." "So pretty much never," Jamie admitted with a rueful smile. "What if you could afford to cut back on some of those hours?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that both men understood. This wasn't just about design work. It was about the possibility of changing the entire trajectory of Jamie's life. "I need to see how much work you actually had before I could make any changes," Jamie said carefully. "My family is depending on the income I'm bringing in now." Smart. Never leave a sure thing for a maybe. Marcus respected the caution. "How about this? I'll start by sending you a project this week. Something that should take you about 10 to 15 hours of work. If you can deliver quality results on time and within budget, we'll talk about what ongoing work might look like. What kind of project? Marcus thought quickly. He had been meaning to rebrand one of his smaller production ventures, something that would give Jamie room to be creative while also providing a legitimate test of his abilities. I'm launching a new digital content initiative. I need a logo, basic branding guidelines, and a simple website layout. Clean, modern, professional, but approachable. Think streaming platform meets independent publisher. That sounds amazing, Jamie said, and Marcus could see genuine excitement mixing with nervous energy. When would you need it completed? How does 2 weeks sound? That should give you time to work around your current schedule without feeling pressured. 2 weeks is perfect. Jamie paused, then asked the question Marcus had been expecting. Can I ask why you're doing this? I mean, you don't know me, and there must be plenty of designers you could hire. Why are you taking a chance on someone you just met? It was a fair question, and one that Marcus had been asking himself since the offer had come out of his mouth. The easy answer was that he saw talent and wanted to nurture it. The deeper answer was more complicated. 15 years ago, I was sitting in a diner not unlike this one. Marcus began slowly. I've been turned down for every job I'd applied for. I was 3 months behind on rent, and I was seriously considering giving up on everything I'd ever wanted and moving back home to live in my parents' basement. Jamie nodded, clearly relating to the picture Marcus was painting. A woman at the counter overheard me making a desperate phone call to my bank, trying to get an extension on an overdraft fee. When I hung up, she turned around and told me she owned a small marketing company and had been looking for someone to write copy for her website. She offered me 3 days' work that paid enough to cover my rent and groceries for a month. Did she know you needed help? I think she suspected, but she didn't hire me out of pity. She hired me because she listened to how I communicated on that phone call and realized I might be able to help her solve a problem she was having. The work I did for her led to other opportunities, which eventually led to everything that came after. Marcus paused, remembering that pivotal moment when a stranger's kindness had literally changed the course of his life. She could have minded her own business, he continued. She could have assumed that someone who couldn't pay their bank fees probably wasn't worth taking a risk on. Instead, she saw potential where I could only see problems. I've never forgotten that. What happened to her? Sarah Martinez. She became one of my closest friends and eventually came to work for me as head of marketing for my production company. Her willingness to take a chance on a desperate kid in a diner ended up being one of the best business decisions either of us ever made. The story seemed to resonate with Jamie, who was listening with the kind of intense attention that suggested he understood the deeper implications of what Marcus was sharing. So, when you see someone talented who's in a tough situation, Jamie began. I remember what it felt like to need someone to believe in me when I couldn't believe in myself. Marcus finished. But, Jamie, I want to be very clear about something. This isn't charity. If your work isn't good enough, I won't keep hiring you just because I feel bad about your situation. I'm running a business, and I need results. I understand, Jamie replied, and Marcus could hear the determination in his voice. I won't let you down. I don't think you will. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both processing the unexpected direction their conversation had taken. Around them, the diner continued its quiet evening rhythm, unaware that something potentially life-changing was happening in the corner booth. Can I ask you something else? Jamie said, Of course. How do you do it? Balance wanting to help people with making good business decisions? It seems like those things could conflict sometimes. It was a sophisticated question, one that showed Jamie was thinking beyond his immediate circumstances to the broader implications of success and responsibility. They do conflict sometimes, Marcus admitted. But I've learned that the best business decisions are usually also the most human ones. Treating people fairly, recognizing talent wherever you find it, building relationships based on mutual respect. Those aren't just nice ideas. They're what create loyal employees, strong partnerships, and sustainable success. What about when someone can't deliver? When kindness isn't enough? Then you make the hard decision to part ways, but you do it with honesty and respect. You give people clear expectations, and real opportunities to meet them. And you remember that failure to thrive in one situation doesn't mean someone won't succeed in another. Marcus could see Jamie absorbing this philosophy, filing it away for future reference. Here was someone who was naturally thinking about how to pay forward any opportunities he received, even before he'd actually received them. One more thing, Marcus said, reaching for his wallet. What do I owe you for dinner? And don't try to tell me it's on the house. Oh, you don't need to? Jamie began automatically. I absolutely do need to. Good food and good service deserve fair compensation. What's the damage? Jamie reluctantly told him the total, and Marcus left enough cash to cover the bill plus a tip that was generous without being conspicuous. He'd learned that overly large tips could sometimes make service workers uncomfortable, creating awkwardness rather than gratitude. As they prepared to leave the booth, Marcus handed Jamie a second business card. My direct contact information, he explained. Text me tomorrow with your email address, and I'll send you the project brief. Take your time with it. Ask questions if anything isn't clear, and don't be afraid to show me multiple concepts if you have different ideas. Thank you, Jamie said, and the words carried weight far beyond simple politeness. I mean it. Thank you for listening, and for giving me this chance, and for treating me like a professional instead of someone to feel sorry for. Thank you for trusting me with your story, Marcus replied, and for reminding me why I got into this business in the first place. They stood up from the booth, and Jamie extended his hand for a firm handshake. As they walked toward the front of the restaurant together, Marcus noticed that Jamie's posture had changed. The defeated slump was gone, replaced by something that looked like purpose. At the front door, they paused. Mr. Chun, Jamie said, and then stopped himself. Actually, what should I call you when we're working together? Marcus is fine. We're colleagues now, not just customer and server. Marcus, then, I won't let you down. Whatever this project turns out to be, I'm going to give you the best work I've ever done. I'm counting on it, Marcus said with a smile. And Jamie? Start thinking bigger. You're capable of more than you realize. As Marcus stepped out into the rain, pulling his jacket tighter against the wind, he reflected on how drastically different this evening had turned out compared to his expectations. He'd come looking for a quiet meal and anonymity. Instead, he found a reminder of why success meant nothing if it wasn't shared, and why the most meaningful investments were often made in people rather than projects. Behind him, through the window, he could see Jamie talking animatedly with Mrs. Patterson, his whole demeanor transformed from the broken young man who had been crying alone in the kitchen just an hour earlier. Marcus didn't know it yet, but this chance encounter was about to become much more than a simple business arrangement. It was the beginning of a story that would ultimately reach far beyond one family's struggle, touching lives in ways that neither he nor Jamie could possibly have imagined. 3 days after their encounter at Rosie's Diner, Marcus sat in his home office, genuinely impressed by what he was looking at on his computer screen. Jamie had submitted not just one logo concept, but 5 distinctly different approaches to the branding challenge, each accompanied by thoughtful explanations of the design choices and target audience considerations. More impressive than the quantity was the quality. These weren't amateur sketches or basic templates downloaded from free websites. They were sophisticated professional designs that demonstrated both creative vision and strategic thinking. Jamie had clearly spent considerable time researching current design trends, studying Marcus's other business ventures for context clues, and developing concepts that were both original and commercially viable. Marcus picked up his phone and dialed the number Jamie had provided. Hello. The voice was slightly breathless, as if Jamie had run to answer the call. Jamie, it's Marcus. Do you have a few minutes to talk? Of course. Is everything okay with the designs? If you need changes, I can have revisions to you by tomorrow, or if they're not what you were looking for at all, I can start over with a completely different approach. Jamie, Marcus interrupted gently. Breathe. The designs are excellent. I'm calling because I want to hire you for the full project, and I'd like to discuss expanding our working relationship. Silence on the other end of the line, then a shaky exhale. Really? In fact, I showed your concepts to my business partner, and she wants to know if you'd be interested in taking on additional projects for our other ventures. We've been looking for someone with fresh perspective who can work across different industries and audiences. Marcus could hear movement in the background, as if Jamie was finding somewhere private to have this conversation. How much additional work are we talking about? Jamie asked, his voice more controlled now, but still carrying an edge of disbelief. Potentially 20 to 30 hours a week if you want it and can handle the workload. Mix of one-off projects and ongoing retainer work. We're talking about real money, Jamie. The kind that could change your family situation significantly. What kind of real money? Marcus had done the math ahead of this call. For the logo package you submitted, $1,500. For ongoing work, we're looking at somewhere between $4,000 and $7,000 monthly, depending on project scope and your availability. The silence stretched so long that Marcus began to wonder if the call had dropped. Jamie? You still there? I'm here, came the whispered reply. I'm just trying to process what you just said. $4,000 to $7,000 a month? That's more than I make from all my jobs combined. Which brings me to my next question. How quickly could you transition away from your other work to focus on this full-time? Jamie paused, clearly trying to think through the logistics. I need to give 2 weeks' notice at both places. But, Marcus, what if this doesn't work out? What if I can't deliver what you need, or what if the work dries up? My family can't afford for me to make a mistake like that. The caution was understandable, and Marcus respected it. Jamie was thinking like someone who'd learned that security, however modest, was precious and not to be risked lightly. How about this? Marcus proposed. We start with a trial period. 3 months of guaranteed work at the rates we discussed. That gives us both time to see how the arrangement works out. If either of us isn't happy after 3 months, we reassess. But it also gives you enough of a track record that finding other design work should be easier if needed. 3 months guaranteed. 3 months guaranteed. And, Jamie, based on what I've seen so far, I'm not worried about your ability to deliver. You should stop worrying about it too. After they worked out the practical details and into the call, Marcus sat back in his chair, feeling a familiar satisfaction that came from making a decision he knew was right on multiple levels. Yes, Jamie was talented and would add value to his projects. But beyond the business logic was something more important, the memory of how it felt to have someone take a chance on him when he desperately needed it. His phone buzzed with a text message from Jamie. Thank you for changing my family's life. You'll never know what this means to us. Actually, Marcus thought he had a pretty good idea. Over the following weeks, the professional relationship between Marcus and Jamie developed into something that exceeded both men's expectations. Jamie's work was consistently excellent, but more than that, he brought a level of thoughtfulness and dedication that reminded Marcus why he'd gotten into creative industries in the first place. Jamie didn't just complete assignments. He anticipated needs, proposed solutions to problems Marcus hadn't even realized he had, and approached every project with the kind of enthusiasm that was contagious. His design work was getting better with each iteration, and his understanding of brand strategy was developing rapidly. More importantly, the impact on Jamie's family situation was immediate and profound. Within a month, they had caught up on their rent and utility payments. Jamie's mother was able to afford better medications and physical therapy that significantly improved her quality of life. His sister Emma was able to sign up for SAT prep courses and start seriously researching colleges without the shadow of financial impossibility hanging over her dreams. But what Marcus found most remarkable was that Jamie's success seemed to energize rather than satisfy him. Instead of relaxing into comfort, he was working harder, learning faster, and thinking bigger. During one of their regular check-in calls, Jamie mentioned something that caught Marcus's attention. I've been thinking, Jamie said, about other people in situations like mine was. Kids with talent who can't afford college, or families dealing with medical crises, or single parents trying to make ends meet while pursuing dreams that seem impossible. What about them? Marcus asked, though he suspected where this conversation was heading. What if this could be bigger than just me? What if there was a way to connect people who have opportunities with people who have talent, but not resources? It was exactly the kind of thinking that Marcus had hoped to see develop in Jamie. Success that turned inward created entitled individuals. Success that turned outward created leaders. Tell me more about what you're envisioning. I don't have all the details worked out yet, Jamie admitted, but I keep thinking about that night at the diner, about how you could have just eaten your meal and left, but instead you chose to see me as a person worth investing in. How many other people are out there right now, in diners and grocery stores and coffee shops, with incredible potential that nobody recognizes because they're too busy surviving to showcase it properly? Marcus found himself leaning forward, genuinely excited by the direction of Jamie's thoughts. Go on. What if we created some kind of platform or program that connected people with talent to people with opportunities? Not charity, but genuine partnerships. People like me could showcase their abilities, and people like you could find fresh talent while also making a difference. People like me? Jamie laughed. Successful business owners, entrepreneurs, executives. People who have the resources to take chances on improving talent and the wisdom to recognize potential when they see it. The idea was ambitious and potentially impactful, but Marcus could also see the challenges. How would you ensure quality? How would you prevent people from taking advantage? How would you scale something like that? I don't know yet, Jamie said honestly, but I think those are solvable problems if the core concept is sound. What do you think? Am I crazy for thinking this could work? Marcus was quiet for a moment, not because he thought the idea was crazy, but because he was thinking about how it might actually be implemented. He had the resources, the connections, and the business experience to help turn Jamie's vision into reality. More than that, he had the motivation that came from remembering what it felt like to need exactly this kind of opportunity. I don't think you're crazy at all, he said finally. I think you might be onto something really important. Really? Really? What would you say if I told you I'd be interested in exploring this idea seriously? Maybe as a formal business venture? The excitement in Jamie's voice was palpable. I'd say that I've already started working on a business plan and some preliminary research. Nothing formal yet, just notes and ideas, but I've been thinking about it constantly. Marcus smiled. Of course, Jamie had already started planning. The work ethic that had carried him through multiple jobs was now focused on creating something that could impact others facing similar struggles. Send me what you have, Marcus said. Let's set up a meeting next week to discuss this properly. Not as employer and freelancer, but as potential business partners. After ending the call, Marcus realized that his impulsive decision to offer Jamie work had evolved into something much more significant. What had started as one man helping another had the potential to become a systematic way of creating opportunities for people who needed them most. But before they could move forward with any larger vision, Marcus knew he needed to have a conversation he'd been putting off. Jamie still didn't know who he really was, still thought of him as simply a successful businessman rather than a public figure with significant resources and influence. If they were going to be partners in something meaningful, that conversation could no longer be delayed. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd originally been drawn to Jamie partly because the young man saw him as just another person, not as Marcus Chun, the celebrity. But if they were going to change lives on a larger scale, his platform and resources would be essential tools. The anonymity that had allowed their relationship to develop naturally would eventually need to be sacrificed for the greater good they could accomplish together. Marcus looked out his office window at the city below, thinking about all the Jamies out there, talented, hardworking people whose potential was being wasted because they lacked opportunity rather than ability. What if there really was a way to systematically identify and nurture that potential? The idea was ambitious enough to be intimidating, but Marcus had learned something important over the years. The most worthwhile projects usually were. And he was beginning to think that his chance encounter with a crying server in a small-town diner might turn out to be the most important business meeting of his career. He picked up his phone and began typing a message to his assistant, asking her to clear his calendar for the following week. If he and Jamie were going to explore turning their shared vision into reality, they would need uninterrupted time to think big, plan carefully, and figure out how to build something that could outlast them both. Outside his window, the city hummed with the energy of millions of people pursuing their own dreams and struggling with their own challenges. Somewhere out there were the next generation of Jamies, people with talent, determination, and potential who just needed someone to believe in them. Marcus was ready to help find them. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the back of a packed auditorium at the local community center, watching Jamie address an audience of entrepreneurs, college students, and community leaders. The transformation was remarkable, not just in Jamie's confidence and speaking ability, but in the scope of what they had accomplished together. The opportunity bridge, Jamie was saying, clicking to the next slide in his presentation, isn't just about connecting talented individuals with employment opportunities. It's about creating a sustainable ecosystem where potential is recognized and nurtured regardless of economic circumstances. Marcus smiled as he listened to Jamie explain the program they had spent 4 months developing and implementing. What had started as a conversation about helping people like Jamie's former self had evolved into a comprehensive platform that was already changing lives across 3 states. The numbers were impressive enough on their own. In 6 months, Opportunity Bridge had connected 847 individuals with meaningful work opportunities, provided skills training to over 2,000 people, and facilitated partnerships between 156 businesses and previously overlooked talent pools. But Marcus knew the real measure of their success wasn't in statistics. It was in stories like the one Jamie was sharing now. Maria Santos is a single mother of 3 who was working 2 minimum wage jobs while taking online courses in web development. Jamie continued. She had incredible skills, but no professional portfolio and no connections in the tech industry. Through Opportunity Bridge, she was paired with a startup founder who needed exactly her combination of technical ability and understanding of the Hispanic market. Today, 6 months later, Maria is the lead developer for a company that just secured its 2nd round of venture funding. The audience applauded, but Marcus was thinking about the dozens of similar stories they had already accumulated. Small business owners finding talented employees they never would have discovered through traditional hiring processes. College graduates with innovative ideas, connecting with mentors who could help them navigate the business world. Skilled workers in rural areas finding remote opportunities that allowed them to stay in their communities while building successful careers. What made Marcus most proud was that they had managed to scale the personal approach that had worked so well in his relationship with Jamie. Every connection made through Opportunity Bridge was facilitated by real people who took time to understand both sides of the equation, what opportunities were really available, and what talent was actually being offered. The key insight, Jamie was explaining to the audience, is that talent is evenly distributed, but opportunity isn't. Our job isn't to create talent. It already exists everywhere. Our job is to create pathways that allow that talent to connect with the people and organizations that can help it flourish. After Jamie's presentation, Marcus joined him on stage for a panel discussion about the future of workforce development and entrepreneurial opportunity. It was the first time they had appeared together publicly, and Marcus had finally revealed his full identity and background to both Jamie and the broader community. The revelation had initially overwhelmed Jamie, who suddenly understood why Marcus had been able to make such significant investments in their shared vision. But after the initial shock, Jamie had adapted with the same grace and professionalism he brought to everything else, focusing on the work rather than the celebrity aspect of their partnership. Marcus, the moderator, was asking, "What made you decide to get involved in this type of work? It's quite different from your entertainment industry projects." Marcus glanced at Jamie before answering, remembering that night in the diner that had started everything. "I think the entertainment industry and workforce development have more in common than people realize. Both are about recognizing and nurturing talent, about creating platforms for people to share their gifts with the world. The main difference is scale and access." Can you elaborate on that? In entertainment, we're constantly looking for fresh voices, unique perspectives, innovative approaches to storytelling. But our traditional talent discovery systems tend to focus on people who already have certain advantages, access to good schools, industry connections, the financial freedom to pursue unpaid internships or speculative projects. Marcus paused, organizing his thoughts. What if the next great screenwriter is currently working night shifts at a factory to support their family? What if the most innovative marketing mind in the country is stocking shelves at a grocery store because they can't afford to take unpaid positions at advertising agencies? We're losing incredible talent because we're not looking in the right places. Jamie nodded, picking up the thread. That's exactly what Opportunity Bridge is designed to address. We're not trying to change people to fit existing systems. We're trying to change systems to recognize and accommodate the talent that already exists. The conversation continued for another 30 minutes, covering topics from funding models to expansion plans to the role of technology in facilitating human connections. But Marcus found his attention drifting to the audience, wondering how many people sitting in those seats had their own version of Jamie's story. Talent waiting to be recognized, potential waiting to be unleashed. After the event, Marcus and Jamie drove back to the office space they had rented for Opportunity Bridge operations. It was a far cry from the corporate headquarters of Marcus's other ventures, but it had something those spaces lacked: walls covered with photos and stories from the people whose lives have been touched by their work. "How do you think that went?" Jamie asked as they settled into the comfortable chairs in what had become their regular planning area. "I think we're ready for the next phase," Marcus replied. The response from other cities has been overwhelming. Chicago, Denver, Atlanta, they all want to pilot programs. The question is whether we can scale without losing the personal touch that makes this work. It was a challenge they had been wrestling with since the program's early success had attracted national attention. Media outlets had started calling Opportunity Bridge a revolutionary approach to workforce development, and policymakers were asking how the model could be replicated across the country. "I've been thinking about that," Jamie said, pulling out a tablet covered with notes and sketches. "What if we approach scaling the same way we approached the original program? Instead of trying to manage everything centrally, what if we train local coordinators who can adapt our model to their specific communities?" Marcus leaned forward to examine Jamie's plans. Over the past 6 months, he had watched his former server develop into a sophisticated strategic thinker, someone who could see both big-picture possibilities and practical implementation challenges. "Franchise model, but for social impact," Marcus mused. "Train people to run local Opportunity Bridge programs using our methods and resources, but with flexibility to address regional needs and opportunities." Exactly. And it solves another problem, too: unemployment among recent college graduates who want to make a difference, but can't find meaningful work. We could recruit coordinators from people who are passionate about workforce development, but don't have traditional nonprofit or government experience. It was elegant and practical, addressing multiple challenges simultaneously. Marcus could see how it might work, could envision Opportunity Bridge centers in dozens of cities, each one adapted to local needs, but connected to a broader network of resources and support. "You know what this means, don't you?" Marcus said. "What?" "If we do this right, if we really scale this nationally, you're going to become the face of a movement. No more anonymity, no more working behind the scenes. Are you ready for that level of visibility?" Jamie considered the question seriously. 6 months ago, I was crying alone in a restaurant kitchen because I couldn't figure out how to pay my family's bills. Today, we're talking about changing how opportunity works in America. If visibility is the price of being able to help more people find their own version of what you gave me, then yes, I'm ready. The commitment in his voice reminded Marcus of his own journey from struggling writer to public figure. There were costs to visibility and success, but there were also responsibilities that came with having a platform to create change. "There's something else we need to discuss," Marcus said. "As we grow, we're going to need more funding than I can provide alone. That means bringing in other investors, probably creating a board, potentially going the nonprofit route, or exploring social venture models. It means you'll have to share control of something you helped create." "Good," Jamie replied without hesitation. This was never supposed to be about control. It was supposed to be about impact. If bringing in other people with resources and expertise means we can help more people, then that's what we should do. Marcus felt a surge of pride in his protege-turned-partner. Jamie had not only learned to think strategically about business growth, but he had maintained the values-driven perspective that had inspired the entire venture. They spent the next 2 hours planning the next phase of Opportunity Bridge's expansion, mapping out timelines, discussing potential partnerships, and identifying the key decisions that would need to be made over the coming months. As they worked, Marcus reflected on how dramatically both of their lives had changed since that rainy Tuesday evening at Rosie's Diner. Jamie's family situation had stabilized completely. His mother's medical treatments were no longer a source of financial stress, and her condition had actually improved with better care and reduced family anxiety. His sister Emma had not only gotten into her first-choice college with a partial scholarship, but she had also started volunteering with Opportunity Bridge's youth mentorship program, helping other high school students navigate the college application process. For Marcus, the project had reconnected him with a sense of purpose that had originally drawn him to creative work. Yes, entertainment projects were fulfilling in their own way, but there was something uniquely satisfying about work that directly improved people's daily lives and expanded their possibilities for the future. You know what I think about sometimes? Jamie said as they were packing up their materials for the evening. What's that? All the people who were in that diner the night we met. The couple sharing pie, the man doing crossword puzzles, Mrs. Patterson in the kitchen. They had no idea they were witnessing the beginning of something that would eventually touch thousands of lives. It makes me wonder what other important moments are happening right now in ordinary places, unnoticed by most of the world. Marcus smiled, appreciating both the observation and the reminder of where they had started. Maybe that's why this works. The most meaningful connections often happen when nobody's performing, when people are just being genuinely human with each other. As they prepared to leave, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message from Mrs. Patterson at the diner. Over the past months, she had become an enthusiastic supporter of Opportunity Bridge, helping them identify other young people in the community who could benefit from the program. Thought you'd want to know? The message read. The young man who replaced Jamie's evening shifts just got accepted to culinary school with a scholarship we helped him apply for. The ripples keep spreading. Marcus showed the message to Jamie, who grinned broadly. See? It's working exactly like it's supposed to. As they walked out of the office together, Marcus thought about the unpredictable nature of impact. He had gone to dinner that evening looking for nothing more than a quiet meal and anonymity. Instead, he had found a reminder of why success was only meaningful when it was shared, why talent deserved recognition regardless of circumstances, and why the most important business decisions were often the most human ones. Looking ahead, Marcus could see challenges and opportunities in equal measure. Scaling Opportunity Bridge would require careful planning, significant resources, and the kind of attention to detail that separated sustainable organizations from good intentions. But he was confident in their foundation, in the team they had built, and in the demonstrated demand for what they were offering. More than that, he was confident in the principle that had started it all, that everyone deserved to have their potential recognized, that talent was worth investing in regardless of its packaging, and that sometimes the most powerful thing one person could do for another was simply to listen, to see, and to believe in possibilities that others might overlook. The rain had stopped, and the evening was clear and bright with promise. Marcus and Jamie walked toward their cars, already planning their next meeting, their next project, their next opportunity to turn potential into reality for someone who needed it most. Behind them, the Opportunity Bridge office glowed with the warm light of continued possibility, ready for another day of connecting talent with opportunity, of transforming lives one meaningful partnership at a time. The work would continue, the impact would grow, and somewhere across the country, in diners and coffee shops and community centers, other important conversations were just beginning. The story that had started with overheard tears had become a movement built on recognized potential. And this was only the beginning.